everyone, and welcome back to building a web application from scratch. Now, it's been a little bit since I've posted a video. I took a little time off over the holidays, so I hope everyone had a good Christmas and New Year's and holiday season. But it's time to get back in it and jump back into our application. So in this video, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be setting up our Angular front end with PrimeNG and TailWind CSS. So if you're following along in the project management software, which I always encourage everyone to do, we're going to go ahead and grab our task and we're going to move this over to in progress. I'm going to go ahead and open that task. And it looks like we've got just a simple sentence around setting up all the stuff. So let's go ahead and break this down into some subtasks around what we're going to do today. So the first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to create our Angular application. After we create the application, we're going to create basic file structure. It's just like a few directories that I always create whenever I start a project. Then we're going to install and configure PrimeNG, and we'll show what that is when we go to that task. Next, we're going to configure TailWind for PrimeNG. Then what we'll do is we'll test by creating a shell and dashboard. And then after we do that, I think we're going to wrap it up by creating some environment variables. So we're going to create environment files and variables. And that's just going to set us up for creating our APIs and stuff in the future. So let's go ahead and jump in. So let's go ahead and go to our text editor, whichever one you're using. I'm using Cursor, but you can use whatever you want. We're going to, in our top directory of our to-do app, we're going to create a new folder and we're going to call it front end. So just separate that front end and back end. Create a fresh thing here. Open up my terminal and I'm going to cd into front end. From here, we're going to create that Angular application. So what we're going to do is we're going to say npx p, and all these commands are going to be posted into the blog post after I do the video. So you can always reference all these commands and code that we'll be writing in that blog post. That should be linked in the video. So npx p, I'm going to say at Angular CLI latest. And then we're going to say ng new Angular app. Like I said, I like to call my applications like the technology they're around. We already know it's for the to-do app, so I like to call it Angular app. And then, okay, we got an error here. Ng new Angular app. What did it like there? Okay. Let's clear that out. Try that again. So let's say npx. Let's just go p at Angular CLI latest. All right, and now let's go npx ng new Angular app. Okay. So this is going to ask us which style system we want to use. We want to use TailWind CSS because that's what we're going to be building for our application. Do you want to enable server-side rendering? We're going to say no because we're going to sit behind authentication for our application. If you were going to build a blog or something where you required all this information to show for like featured images and stuff, you'd want to use server-side rendering. We don't care about that, so we're going to say no. Okay. Which AI tools do you want to configure with Angular best practices? That's neat. It's something I haven't seen before. I'm going to go ahead and go to cursor because that's what I'm using. But this looks like it's pretty optional. So just select whatever you're using or none if you want. And this is going to set up our Angular application here. Alrighty, so now if we expand our front end, we should see our Angular app here. Looks like we got that cursor markdown file, public. So here's our application, source, app. You can see we got our app.html. So this is like the main page that we'd see. So let's go ahead and test this out. So let's say npx gserve. Oh, sorry, we got a cd into that Angular app. So now let's go npx gserve. All right, would you like to share the data? I'm going to say no. Okay, so now we should be able to go to this domain, localhost 4200. You can see our app is running. So now that we've tested that, let's go ahead and close down that. And we're going to scroll all the way down and we're going to highlight everything in app.html besides router outlet. We're going to delete it, click save. So now let's go with our common file structure. So inside of our app directory in our Angular app, we're going to create a few directories. So first one, we're going to call core. We're going to need another directory and we're going to call it shared. In another directory and we're going to call it features. And we just want to do this so we can really segment out like our core like routing, things like not routing, but core like authentication, things like that. Our features are going to be like our dashboard that we create. Like our core is going to contain our like shell component that we'll build in a few steps. So we're just kind of separating out the different functionalities into these particular buckets, right? Shared components, features, and then like the core application. All right, so let's go ahead and install PrimeNG. Well, first, let's actually get rid of that and let's visit PrimeNG and just take a look at what it is. Right, so it's just a UI library for Angular, right? It allows us to see all these different components, buttons, timelines, overlays, dialogue here, right? It's just a component library so we don't have to build all these things ourselves, right? We can import this and then use all these components. So you can see the installation here. So you can follow these steps if you want, but I'm just going to go ahead and run through them. What I found is that whenever you're combining PrimeNG and TailWind, or just whenever you're going through this documentation, it doesn't always work exactly as you'd expect. And I also like to theme it, right? So we got our theming, and inside of PrimeNG, it lets you select your primary colors. Like they have all these different colors here, right? And so you can install just a basic theme. This PrimeNG has these preset themes and preset colors. So you could just install, we're going to use this aura theme and not customize any of the colors, but I like to set it up to allow for flexibility in the future. If I want to, use a particular color or create a darker mode, which we will in the future, we're going to want to, actually create a theme for our application. We're not just going to install the baseline theme here. So, and it's pretty easy to do. So let's go ahead and go back to our text editor, and we're going to install PrimeNG. So we're going to say npm install PrimeNG prime UIX. Oops. I don't know why it's doing that. Let's go ahead and close that down and open up a new terminal. Don't like what it was doing there. Front end, seeding to the Angular app. All right, so then we're going to run pm install PrimeNG at prime UIX themes, and we're actually going to install prime icons as well, because we're going to want to have icons in here. And if you follow that documentation on getting started here, you're going to see that the prime icons isn't a part of that. So we're going to install it. Okay, so we've got a couple vulnerabilities here. Address all issues, including breaking changes. Let's run npm audit fix. So let's go ahead and run that. Say npm audit fix force. One more time. Because I'm spelling it wrong. There we go. Alrighty. So it looks like it updated that Angular CLI, moved it, found 0 vulnerabilities. Okay. So now we can go ahead and move along, because we don't want to have those vulnerabilities. We're at the start of our project. We want to make sure everything's nice and clean. All right, next thing we want to do is we want to actually set up this theme, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to right click and we're going to create a new folder inside of our source directory, and we're going to call it theme. Inside this theme, we're going to create a new file, and we're going to call it PrimeNG.preset.ts TypeScript. And inside of here is where we're going to define our theme. So we're going to import define preset from at prime ng prime UIX themes. And then we're going to import aura from PrimeNG themes aura, right? So that's going to be the theme we use. Then we're going to export const We're going to call this emerald preset. So hopping back over to our piece here, I wanted to use, go to our style mode. I want to use this emerald color scheme. All right, so that's what we're going to use. So saying emerald preset equals define preset. What you don't want that. We want aura. So now we're going to say semantic. And if you want to know about this stuff, hopping back, or sorry for hopping back over all the time, but you can read about how PrimeNG's architecture works here with semantic tokens, component tokens, and primitive tokens, right? Because we're going to be updating the semantic token of primary color to this color scheme that we want, right? We're going to use some primitive tokens inside of our semantic token to say this is the primary color we want to use. So hopping back over, we're going to semantic, and we're going to say primary. And inside of primary, we're going to say 50. Quote, bracket, emerald dot 50. All right. And we're going to do that all the way to 950. Click save. So now what we want to do, I was like, close my brackets there. So now with this custom preset, we need to register it with our Angular application whenever it starts up. So we're going to go to our app config file, and we're going to import provide PrimeNG, and we're going to import our emerald preset. So our provide ng just lets us provide the PrimeNG theme that we want to use into our Angular application, and we're importing that emerald preset so we can define what theme we want to use, our created template preset. So we're going to say provide PrimeNG. We're going to say theme. We're going to say preset emerald preset. And we're going to say options CSS layer CSS layer, or sorry, we don't want to do that yet. We're just going to say options CS layer true. And we want to close this all down. Okay. So the CSS layer option is important. So essentially, since we're using Tailwind as well, it ensures that PrimeNG styles are placed in a predictable CSS layer, and it's essentially just going to avoid conflicts between PrimeNG and Tailwind, right? It's essentially going to allow us to, once we get our PrimeNG and Tailwind configured, this is going to change a little bit, and we're going to essentially say what loads before what in terms of CSS. So now let's go ahead and configure that Tailwind CSS. So, well, actually, let's go ahead and test this out first. Let's go ahead and go into our app.html or app.typescript, and let's import a PrimeNG component. So we'll say import. Let's import button module from PrimeNG. Let's import that button module, so you have to include it in your imports as well. In our app.html, let's put that P button. Save. And if you were ever wondering why we did all that, if you go to the components and you go to a button, it's going to tell you how to import the button and then how to basically use it and all the different use cases for using this particular component. So now that we've added it, we've saved it. Let's go to our terminal and let's say npx ngserve. Let's start our application up. and test it out. So let's go to that local host again. So it just says click. We do not see the green button. Let's get rid of this options and see what happens. There you go. Okay. So we got rid of that options layer. We'll mess around with that in the future once we get everything configured. So you can see we have our emerald button right there. All right, on to TailWind. So we already installed what we needed with TailWind whenever we built our Angular application because we chose that TailWind CSS style sheet. So if we come to our styles.css, you can actually see that it's imported here. Right, so that's already taken care of for us. What we need to do is we need to install the compatible library that allows PrimeNG and TailWind to work together. And if you come to our documentation inside of PrimeNG, you can see there's TailWind CSS documentation. Right, and it tells us how to set this up. However, again, I always find that I run into some issues, so I'm just going to do it how I know to do it. But you can always try to go through this documentation yourself if you want. So we want to install this TailWind CSS Prime UI. So coming back to our text editor here. Let's open up our terminal. CD front end. CD Angular app. And we're going to install that TailWind CSS Prime UI. So it added that package. So then what we're going to say is we're going to say at import TailWind CSS Prime UI, and we're actually going to import those Prime icons as well. So we're going to say Prime icons, Prime icons CSS. Save that. So with this style in place, we'll configure this layering now. This ensures that we're going to try to ensure that that PrimeNG and TailWind don't conflict now. So what we're going to do, let's go ahead and come over to our app config, and we're going to say options. So we're going to say CSS layer. We're going to give it a name. We're going to call it PrimeNG. Got that in quotes. PrimeNG. And then we're going to say order is going to be theme, base, PrimeNG. Save. Okay. So now what we're going to do is we're going to try and test everything out. So we're going to, inside of our core directory, we're going to create a new folder, and we're going to call it layout. So let's go ahead and open that into a terminal. So inside our layout directory, we're going to say npx ng generate a component, a new component, and we're going to call that shell. You can see that it created that shell component for us. And then we're going to go into our features, and we're going to create a new folder, and we're going to call this dashboard. Inside of dashboard, we're going to create a new folder, and we're going to call it pages. And then we're going to open that in a new terminal, and we're going to create a new component called dashboard. So we're going to say npx ng generate component dashboard. And it's going to create that dashboard component for us. So essentially what we're doing is we're going to create like a template, a shell for our application that our dashboard is going to sit inside. And that's how we're going to test it, right? So we're going to use some TailWind styling along with PrimeNG components to construct the shell and build out a dashboard. While I'm thinking about it, I guess I didn't really introduce TailWind. So we go to TailWind documentation here. Let's just go to TailWind. We don't want TailWind. We want TailWind CSS. Okay. So what you can see is we have all these different layout options, right? Aspect ratios. They're essentially CSS classes that are already built for us to allow us to easily apply classes to add spacing, flex boxes, things like that to our application. We have to create our own CSS styling. So it's just essentially pre-configured CSS style classes that we're allowed to use, right? Font sizes, things like that. So it's really useful when building applications because you don't have to define all this yourself. It's already defined through TailWind. So coming back to our application, let's go ahead and go into our shell component. And what we're going to do is we're going to import our router outlet. And we're going to import a button module as well. Right, click save. So inside our shell HTML, we can now create the shell component. So what we're going to do is we're going to say div class equals min height screen. We're going to say background surface 0. And we're going to say text color. We're going to close that down. So it's just wrapping everything. And then we're going to say header class equals border B, border surface 200. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to say div class equals mx auto max width is going to be 6XL. We're going to say padding X, or like x-axis padding. We're going to say 4. Our padding Y. I'm going to say 4. I'm going to say flex, so it's inline. Items, we're going to say center. Justify between. And you don't have to worry. This isn't an HTML course, right? But essentially what we're doing is we're using the different styling from TailWind CSS, right, to build this shell, right? So you could look through here and search through here for all these different style components that we're using, but you don't have to worry about it, right? I'm going to post this code into the blog post, so you should be able to just copy this from the blog post right into the application. So next we're going to say div class equals font semi-bold and then text, say large. And we're going to call this our to-do app. And then we're going to give it a P button. We're going to say label equals new task. An icon is going to be PI plus. Let's close this div. And let's close our header. said it was already closed. So let's close this header. Let's go ahead and format that document. So then below our header, what we're going to say is we're going to say main. We're going to say class equals MX auto. Our max width is going to be 6XL. Our padding X is going to be 4. And our padding Y is going to be 6. Then inside of here, we're just going to include our router outlet and save. All right, next let's go to our dashboard. In our dashboard HTML, we're not going to import any Prime UI items into our dashboard just yet, but we're going to say section. Inside this section, we're going to say class equals space y 4. Then inside of here, we're going to give an h1 tag. And we're going to say class equals text 2XL font semi-bold. We're going to call that dashboard. Below our h1, we're going to create another div, and we're going to say class equals rounded border. And we're going to say border surface 200, background surface 0, and padding a 5 all around. So then we're going to say p class equals text muted color. I'm going to say if you can see PrimeNG components styled correctly and TailWind utilities applying normally, your setup is working. All right. Below our paragraph, let's create a new div. I'm going to say class equals margin top 4, inline flex. I'm going to say items, center, gap of 2, rounded border, give a background of primary, padding X of 3, padding Y of 2, and then we'll say text, primary, contrast. All right, so then we'll say, give it an icon, and we'll say class equals PI check. And we'll say span. Class equals font medium. And then we'll say PrimeNG plus TailWind integration is working. Save. So if we boot up our application, we're not going to see this, right? So what we need to do is we need to come down to our app.routes and we need to import these routes into our application. So we're going to say import shell from core layout shell, and we're going to import dashboard from features dashboard. You don't want dashboard page, you want dashboard. Right? So we're essentially importing. These routes are like how our URLs show up, right? So we're importing shell and our dashboard. So now instead of our routes, we'll go create some brackets. And we're going to say path. The empty string is our like default path. I'm going to say component is going to be shell. This is then going to have some children. So this is what's going to sit inside of our shell. And we're going to say path also empty string component dashboard. Oops. Save. Okay, our moment of truth. So let's go ahead and start this application. Going back to our terminal, we're going to say npx ngserve. We also want to go to our app.html and we want to remove that button. So what is this saying? Regular opponent. So let's go, looks like our shell.typescript file. Oh, we did not import them. So something important here. So I'm glad this showed up. Right, so we see an error here when building. If it's an Angular opponent, make sure it's verified when you see this. It's because we didn't import it. Just because we imported it up here does not mean it's been included into the component itself. We have to include them into our imports inside of our component. So now if we scroll down, you can see that that actually worked correctly. So if we hop over to our application, you can see everything is working correctly. Here's our header, and here's our dashboard component that's sitting inside of our shell. So everything that we just did works correctly. PrimeNG and TailWind are all set up correctly. Alrighty, so let's hop over to our tasks here and let's mark these things as completed. We installed our Angular application, we set up that file structure, installed and configured PrimeNG, configured TailWind, we tested that. The last thing is going to be to create our environment files and variables. So it has nothing to do with setting up PrimeNG or TailWind. It's just going to set us up for the future. So let's go ahead and create those environment variables. So what we're going to want to do is in our source directory, I'm assuming it doesn't already exist, we're going to want to create a new folder and we're going to call this environments. All right. Inside of our environments, we're going to create 3 files. We're going to call one environment. .ts. We're going to call another one environment. I spelled that wrong. I'm going to go ahead and delete that. Instead of our environments directory, I'm going to say environment, new file, .staging.ts, and we're going to create a final one called .prod.cs. All right. Okay. So in each of these, what we're going to do is we're going to go start with our environment.ts, which is our development environment. And we're going to say export const environment equals production false. And it's going to be the API layer, right? So our Nest server, this is how it's going to connect. So we say API URL, and it's our local host 3000 right here. So that's our API URL. The next thing, actually, let's leave it like that for now. So let's go ahead and do the same thing for staging. Copy, go to staging, false, but instead of this, we're going to say HTTPS api.staging.com. That's fine. We don't have any of these domains yet, so it doesn't matter. Going over our prod, let's paste it. Difference is this one's going to be true. And we'll say api.production.com, right? Who cares? We'll change these once we get our actual URLs whenever we deploy. So now with these environment files in place, we need to tell Angular which one to use. So this is done by file replacements in our angular.json file. So if you come to our application, we want to find, let's see, where are you? Angular.json. All right. So open it up and locate the build configuration right here. So we got build. What we're going to do is we're going to set up some file replacements. So build, you know, options. Let's see, we should see a production one by default. Configurations production right here. Actually, let's go ahead and ask the AI. I set up my Angular JSON file to use my different environment files .ts environment .staging.ts and .prod.ts. So Angular knows which one to use. Let's see what it says. So we need to add our file replacements, which I figured, to our build configurations. Tell Angular which environment to use for each build configuration. Here's an updated configuration section. Production, budgets, type, any component style, output hashing all. And then it's got our file replacements right here. Okay, so right here, see this area? So we're going to go ahead and copy this piece right here. So we're going to put a comma under all, and you see we're going to put file replacements. So this is the environment that we want. It then has us having staging, right? So between development and staging, it's got this staging, budgets type, and it's got our staging environment, and then our development right here. Optimization false. It doesn't look like we need to update anything for our development. So the next thing we want to do to make it easy to run this application in different environments during development, we want to configure matching serve targets. So in our Angular JSON file, the serve section, we want to update some configurations for staging and production. So I think that's exactly what this is saying too, right? So in our serve, all right, here, serve builder, configurations, Angular app, production, build target, Angular app, build production, looks right, build development. So it looks like we want to add staging in here. So inside the serve, staging, so we can build for our staging application, application build production. Looks good to me. Okay. So with this configure in place, Angular is going to automatically swap in the correct environment file based off the build or serve commands that we use. To make this more convenient, we can actually update the project scripts so each environment has a clear command as well. So what we'd want to do is, let's see if we can find our scripts in here. Since I don't mess around with these much, I'm actually going to ask AI this as well. So to make this more convenient, can we update the project scripts so each environment has a clear command? So it looks like this is in our package.json. So you see scripts here. It's saying available commands, development environment, npm start, npm run start dev, npm run build dev, npm run start staging, npm run build staging, and production environments. So let's go ahead and look at what we got. ng start is the same as ng serve. No change. Send. Configuration development. So let's just go ahead and copy this into our scripts. Format that document. So now let's go ahead and close this down. We could say ng, I guess we can just say start dev. ng start dev. Let's go. So how would we start development with this command? Okay, so we'd run npm. npm start is going to npm run start dev. npm start dev. This does the same thing, but it's more explicit about which environment you're using. npm start is going to start the output, right? So we can run, let's define it. So we'll say npm start dev unknown command. Npm run start dev. It's going to build that app, and let's go ahead and look. Alrighty, it looks like that's working. So then if we close it, let's say npm run start staging. Alrighty, it's all working correctly. Our environments are correctly configured, and we've got our commands set up. So now we can run npm run start dev, run start staging, run start production, and it's going to let us start our application for our application in any of our environments. Right? And if we wanted to build it, which we'll get into later, we'll run those commands there. So let's go ahead, close down our application, come back over to our task manager, and we're going to mark that environment files and variables done as well. Let's save our task and let's move it over to completed. And let's mark that as completed. So I hope this was informative, and we're finally getting started to building that front end application. We should be able to start having our front end communicate with our back end very soon. I know it's been a while since I put it out, so thanks for hanging in there. Thanks for listening. I'll catch you guys in the next video.